We are now live. Hello.
Hi.
Um, Thank you, everyone who is joining, either live right now in the chats or if you're watching the playback. Let me know in the comments, in the little chat, what time it is, where you're from. Right now, it's 3 p.m. I'm on the, I always forget, what, I'm on the West Coast. I'm like, which is West and East? That's how you know I'm really tired. My brain's like,
You're not alone.
But yeah, I quickly wanted to say that um, we are going to be voting for our January book soon, literally today after this live show on Twitter. So make sure to check out our Twitter. And if you want to join our Discord to get more updates, let me know and I'll send you the link towards the Discord either through Twitter, you can ask me, or in the chat or in the comments below. Let me know. Other than that, we also launched a Redbubble. So if you want to support the Brown Girl Book Club, you can get like stickers and things like that of the little logo. So definitely check it out. All that's linked below. And what's also linked below is Amber's channel. So I would love to introduce Amber, our lovely special guest this month. If you want to introduce yourself.
I'm super excited to be here, so thanks for having me. I'm Amber. I create content online about books, self-care, productivity, journaling, all that good stuff. I love reading. I'm a big reader. I'm like surrounded by all the books. I couldn't get a good angle to get like books in frame, and you have such a good book background right now that I'm like so jealous, but I'm really excited to talk about this book tonight because I actually like love the original Little Women, so this was such a good like remix for me. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. And I can't wait to go look at the Redbubble because I love a good sticker to like throw on my journal or something. So I'll definitely be
Oh, thank you. And then let's see, Erin's in the chat. Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining. Our MVP always in the chat.
love it.
Oh man, I was gonna ask you a question, but I don't even remember because I got excited because literally I was gonna tell you the only reason this is like a good setup is because I'm sitting on the floor like with a pillow, like right in front of the bookshelf, and you're like on a step stool right now. So it's like it looks cute, but like behind the scenes is never as cute as it seems.
That's like quintessential, like I make content online. It's like I have this one area that in this frame looks really perfect. And then I just surround myself with chaos, but it doesn't matter because everything on screen looks good.
Yes, that's the only thing that matters. It's like how does this set look aesthetic?
Yep, exactly, exactly.
And I'm also really glad to hear that you like the original Little Women. I literally haven't read that book since like high school, and
Yeah,
I didn't read books properly in high school. I was a
right.
skimmer, sparks noter person.
Mhm.
So I mostly know it from the movies because I've watched the movies like religiously, not just like the newer one that came out in the last few years, but the one that came out in I think the 90s or the early
Well, there have
2000s.
been so many Little Women movies, and I feel like if you've watched all of the movies, then you get a really good representation of the book because since there have been so many, I feel like each film has done something that the other one took out. So
Mhm.
this is one of the ones because the book is also like massive. Like it's a very, very chunky book. So I
Mhm.
feel like if this is one where I'm like, the movies as a collective are like almost on par with the book. So
Great. Then I might lean on you towards the end of this live stream to be like, let's talk about the ending. Because I also, that's like a big point that I want to talk about, but we'll
yeah.
do that later. For the first half of this live show, we're just going to be talking about just non spoilery things, things we liked, things we were hoping for, things like that. And then at the 30-minute mark, we'll start talking about spoilers. And I'll let you guys know when we do that, just so you're fully aware, everyone in the chat. Um, but yeah, I'm glad you know. So that way we can parse it through because
Yeah.
I have so many questions. But also let me know in the chat if you managed to read the book this year. So Many Beginnings, a Little Woman remix by Bethany C. Maurer. I was actually really impressed by this book. I haven't decided on my star rating. Let me know in the chat if you guys rated it, if you've read it, what you rated it, and I'm gonna ask Amber. Amber, what did you rate it? I'm curious.
So this one I gave a 4 star, and I think it's one of the ones that if I sit and I think about it a little bit longer, I might bump it to like 4.5 stars because I was really, really impressed with this book. And I feel like I've wanted to read Bethany C. Morrow for a while, and she has some other like YA titles that I feel like come up a lot on like BookTube and Bookstagram, but I haven't read her before. And I think this was a really interesting intro to her, but just having read the original and yeah, I was just super impressed with how it was done. When I first heard about it, I honestly like I was excited about it and then I wasn't. I was like, "Oh, a Little Women remix with black Little Women, that's going to be amazing." And then I was like, "Ooh, slavery. Like I don't think I'm going to like this." But I was really impressed with it. So, yeah, I gave it 4 stars.
Good, good. I think I'm leaning towards a 4 star too. And yeah, when I think about it, I can definitely give it a higher star. I feel like it's one of those books where it's like the story makes sense. It's very historically accurate. Like Bethany C. Maurer did an amazing job really
Yeah.
putting in the research and making it very realistic. But it is talking about slavery. So it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
how do I feel about reading this? Because Little Women is a like the original. I know it's all about a family going through a really hard time, but mostly it's about love, the love
Yeah.
story between like Joe, Megan, Mom. Like they all have their own independent love stories.
Yeah.
So I was like, I really hope this story does a good job kind of bridging the two, and it's definitely something I want to talk about when it comes to Black love
Yeah.
and joy, because I feel like this book after reading it, like at the beginning, I was like, oh shoot, like I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah.
Um, but after finishing it, I'm like, okay, I think this is actually really, really important because I don't think I've read any other book like this. Like
Yes.
I don't know if you've done this where you read a classic book where it has like maybe a white protagonist, a white female protagonist, and you wonder in the back of your head, I'm like, I wonder what how black people are doing during this time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, that's like one thing that I kind of have always taken issue with like with most classics, but like Little Women specifically. I'm like, this is such a specific time for Black people in America, and like this white family basically lives like completely outside of that reality. Like, how is that even possible? So, one thing that I really enjoyed about this one is that you get the sense that like this is about a Black family, and the white people are kind of like dust on the page. It's like they have to be there because like sure, but it's not about them. There's no point where you feel like they're being centered, and that was really refreshing because yeah, there's so many periods of time where we just erased all the black people, and to have them centered in such a beautiful way, I think is why I rated the book so highly.
mhm. I completely agree, where it's like, this is important, and I don't see a lot of people doing this, and a lot of the subject within the book is that it's taking a stance on saying your own history and, giving it value and not dumbing it down for others, which I really appreciate, and I was like, I think that's why this book is so good. Besides that, it's, like, written beautifully and things like that, like, maybe I would have preferred it to be a little bit longer and the
I
focus a
would
little bit more on
too.
love,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah, I
okay.
almost like I feel like because there are like so many characters, we get Bethany C. Morrow is very talented in that she gives us these little slices that I was like, oh, that was beautiful. And that was like great. That's what that person needed. Like there's a couple of like scenes that the mom gets, and I'm like, oh my God, that line was just like so significant for her. But I'm like, I wish she would have had chapters that were like that, where this book could have easily been like 300 to 400 pages, and it would have been like just as wonderful as it was at the length it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I felt that way reading it because there were some really great moments where I was like, "Ooh, I want a whole discussion about that."
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of those discussion points later, like things I want to talk about within this book without getting into too many spoilers. Is the conversation about home
Yeah.
and freedom and the burden that is on Black people to educate. Because I feel like Joe definitely faces a lot of that, and even in some of the conversations Beth and Meg have with other characters about like, okay, how do I politely tell this person that they are completely twisted?
Right.
Like,
And
how do
I
I do that?
appreciated that it's like the conversation that they have with white characters, but also with other black characters, like who
Mhm.
have just had different lives and different perspectives. Because I think it's important with a book like this, where it is so much about black people and their lives, to reinforce that black people aren't a monolith. Like just because we're all black doesn't mean we think the same and have the same lived experiences. And we all do bring something new to different conversations and scenarios. And so, yeah, I think that was so important throughout the book. It's like such a critical theme.
Yes, completely. And I can't wait to dive in a little bit more about that. And that's what kind of excites me about this book after finishing it is that I think it does exactly what it's supposed to in
Yes.
starting that conversation of wanting to learn more, but at the same time really loving and appreciating yourself and like valuing your home and your loved ones and your family,
Yeah.
but also like I wanna learn more. I wanna take the time to understand myself. And I feel like for so long the conversation has been very simply slavery's over, get over
Yeah.
it. Like,
Yep.
why are you still upset? And it's like, okay, the thing is, we're not upset right now about slavery back. Well, okay, maybe we are. Some of us are. Like, yeah, but the conversation isn't really about like let's start a new war. It's about like I just want to be able to be educated about myself. Like the author's note
Mhm.
mentioned how and if you watch the news today, hearing about what people are doing, trying to ban books, trying to not teach history accurately. It's just it seems like there's a constant battle for this need of knowledge, the need of understanding ourselves, and just the total lack of acknowledgement from a lot of people.
Yeah, completely. One thing I follow Angie Thomas on Twitter, and she was talking about just like the impact of so many of her books getting banned. And when I finished this one, I was like, I could definitely see this becoming a banned book. Like there are some lines in it, I'm like, oh, white people are going to get upset by that line, and black
Hmm.
people are going to feel so validated by that line because so much like you mentioned is so many people thinking okay we'll get over it, like it happened, we're not, that's not the situation. But I think what this book does a really good job of is reminding people that everything is sitting on the foundation of something. And so even when people are free and they've moved on and they have more choice and can live lives, like they're still built on the foundation of what happened to them. Like everyone brings a past with them and they bring
Hmm.
their lived experience and their history with them. So, yeah, I agree. It did exactly what it needed to do in really opening the door for more of those conversations.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm like, I like want to petition and be like, can we get a longer one where we actually hash out a lot of
You
those
need an
conversations?
epilogue.
A really, really long epilogue because I really like I think the thing I like about classic literature, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, is that it takes its time really developing those arguments, whereas a lot of like modern YA kind of just has that one crisp line and then we move on to the next subject. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, let's actually talk about this because it's so important. And I feel like this is definitely feels like just an introduction. And I always wonder with these things because it's a short book. It's like, was it short just to be published? Like, were they scared to
Mhm.
actually have those conversations in depth because people wouldn't like it? That a majority of people would be uncomfortable. But it's like, is that what's stopping our progress? This
Yeah.
need to limit the conversation.
Yeah. I think, well, part of it, there's such an interesting like state of YA literature right now where I think publishing, readers, and like the powers that be are realizing that you can put these heavier, more serious topics in books intended for younger audiences because young people are experiencing heavy, dark things in their real lives. So it doesn't make sense that their books would all be like sunshine and fairy tales, but at the same time, like this book would have done probably okay if it were published as an adult book. Like there's so many Little Women fans who are now adult readers who maybe would have picked it up, but I think that this book will do really well as a YA book because that's like the generation, that age group that is open to even receiving more insight and being challenged on the things that they're being taught or not taught in schools. So I
Mhm.
think you're right. I think that there is a lot of pushback around like length and where we're publishing certain things, where it sits in the bookstore, because it's like, okay, we did it, but we didn't do it. Not to say that like having a book like this published as YA doesn't make it like a valid conversation piece, but I do think that not publishing something like this as an adult piece is super intentional. They do adult retellings all the time, but it's very specific retellings that end up as YA, which is, I think, I don't know if it's a part of the problem, but it's definitely like something that publishing should really reckon with and deal with. Because I mean, imagine if this was a 1,000 word book that literally was like a remix to the original in a way that gave every sister and the mother like the full space to be seen on the page and challenge the ideals that are skipped over in the first. Like that would have been so amazing, but also probably very intense. And a
Mhm.
lot of times when things are going to be really really intense, we shy away from them and scale them back a little.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I feel like that's kind of what happened here, and I doubt Bethany Maurer had, like, a lot of choices, like, she was
Yeah.
probably told because this is a series, I don't know if you saw it, but it's, like, a 4,
Oh.
installments of, like, remixed classics. I think Pride and Prejudice is one and Robin Hood. It's a specific YA series, and
Oh.
I think at initially that this was just to kind of modernize classics to get younger audiences reading, but also actually have them be meaningful. So I think, again, the goal was accomplished, but I really like the way you said it, where it's like, if you made this adult, you could actually have those conversations that are like necessary,
Yeah,
we are craving as a society, where it's like, hey, we need to talk about these things that I think and feel.
yeah. I think this is also a good like reminder that adults should be reading YA. Like just because something is in the young adult section and you're in your late 20s or your 30s or 40s or 50s doesn't mean you shouldn't be reading these books. And there are some books that I think are YA and I'm glad that they're published YA because I think as an adult when you read them it makes you think that you can go into those harder conversations and not be battling all of like the pretentiousness or like the I did my research feeling and like you feel like you do have that more accessible entry point. So I hope that people whether they read the original or not would look at something like this and say, "Oh, okay, that made me think about other things. Let me find other material to then really dig into those conversations."
Mhm.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, and I like Aaron's comment here
Oh, yeah.
about, yeah, traditional publishing needs to stop being a bunch of cowards. I mean, yes, we're gonna call them out because
I love
truly
it.
they are. They are. I get that this is a business and they're trying to make money, but at the same time, if your business is about educating people about stories or at least entertainment, like have categories where it's like you're remixing classics. So technically this is a educational thing. You have
Mhm.
to really take those steps and not like water it down.
Yeah.
And let's see, I'm excited for all new types of books that they're finally letting through. I'm also excited. I think we're in a positive push
Yeah.
for publishing to move towards that. I just really I'm worried about the longevity of it currently. Like I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want this to be a trend where we talk about black
Yeah.
people until we're all quiet again and then they're like, okay, back to normal.
Like, racism's over, back to the all white books.
Yeah, so I always get a little worried about that. But now let's talk a little bit about the story without getting into too many spoilers. I wanted to talk to you about the concept of, let's see. There were so many like good moments where I literally had to like pause the book and like write it down. Um,
Oh, yeah.
First off, sorry,
Oh,
what
go
were
ahead.
you gonna say?
I was like, yeah, I took some, like, notes on a little Post-it too, so things I
Oh,
wanted to
great. Yes, remind me to let because I can talk through and like push
remember.
through. So just let me know when you're
All
ready to talk
good.
about that. But when I first started the book, obviously this is a remix of a traditional story. We have Joe, Meg, Amy. What's the fourth girl's name?
Beth.
I'm trying to Beth. Oh yes, Beth. So we have those four classic women, and I was wondering if you had the same issue I had in the beginning, where I couldn't not see them as white women. I was wondering if you had that issue too.
No. I think the only one that I maybe in the beginning had that issue with was Amy, and that's just because Amy is so annoying.
Yes, I agree.
Which is the point of her, but that's probably the
Mhm.
only one, and I specifically saw her as the actress that plays her in, like, the latest movie, I kept seeing
Mhm.
her, and then I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no," and funnily enough, and this is something that, like, is what's interesting to me, anytime they reference their hair, I could not picture their hair, like, I could not picture how they were wearing their hair, which is I don't know, that was, like, a weird thing, it only came up a couple times in the book, but yeah,
Yeah.
Amy was the only one who I really, like, for the first couple of chapters was like, "Not white Amy, this is Amethyst, not white Amy."
Okay, so you did have the trouble with Amy. For some reason, I don't know, I had a problem with all 4 of them, and I think it's because I've been so inundated with the movies that I couldn't stop seeing, like, Emma Watson and, yeah, those actors,
Yeah,
like, playing them, and I had to, like, remind myself. And I think it's because Bethany did such a good job writing them that I just saw them, like, Joe and those, like, characters, and I had a hard time seeing them as being black, and it was just
yeah,
very interesting. I was wondering if you had that same thing. It was only for the very beginning, and I agree with you about the hair. I was also very confused. I was like,
yeah.
"I don't know what they're doing with their hair."
Right, I was like they would say things, I'm like, "Wait, is this a bun? Are you" and then she would be like, "I took my, like, braid down, and then I got the curling iron." I was like, "What in black what?" Like, that is not a thing. Like, what I was confused, but I could not get that, but otherwise, yeah, I agree, though. She did such a good job of translating the characters, like, as they were, but then also, like, amending some things that people probably had issue with, especially towards the end.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to ask you if you had that same thing because I had to keep trying to shift my mind while reading in the beginning. I was like, oh wait, that's don't think of them like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I also wanted to talk about the concept of freedom, which they talked about a lot. Specifically, Lori and Joe had a conversation of like kind of believing in America in the
Yeah.
colonies, where Joe, and this isn't really a spoiler, this is a conversation throughout the book, that Joe's like, I have to believe in this little thing or else where is home for me? Like I don't have a home anywhere if this
Yeah.
isn't my home. Whereas Lori was okay saying, well, this isn't home, period. That this is a handout and it's still like even with the handout, they're looming over us, judging us, taking away supplies or giving supplies with their whims. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about their concept of freedom. Did you like that discussion? Did you agree with it? Did you have any feelings about it?
Yeah, I feel like that's a conversation that Black people today even still have all of the time when you talk about anything to do with America, whether it's voting or politics in general. Like that was a very realistic conversation, and it was amazing to me how I could 100% see that conversation being had in the 1860s, the same way it could be had in the 2020s. And for me, I think the whole concept of freedom, starting with that conversation with Joe and Lori, and then to the end, like that final image, I think that the big message to me was that you have to remember, especially as a Black person, that freedom is not a place, it is like a state of being.
It's a
And
mindset,
yeah,
kind of,
yeah, exactly.
partly.
And I feel like Joe, even when she was making those points to Lori about how she had to believe that there was a physical place for her, also knew in her heart that like it goes so much deeper than place, because think about all the like displacement she had had in her life from being born enslaved to where she was by the time they had that talk. So yeah, it was so well done the way that the concept of freedom was woven in. And I think it was important because the whole point of the book was, yes, this is a Black family who is free, but it's not just a cut and dry thing. It's not like a checkbox where it's like, okay, you're free, you weren't then, now you are now. It's an ongoing process and really coming into like a full state of being.
Yeah, and it also the like repercussions of constantly trying to fight for this like mindset because it's not even
Yeah.
it is also a fight for space and ownership of land and things like that because there's that's also a part of this discussion, but it's also like shifting the mindset because again, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, it's done." Period. It's like this has never been just a declaration. And I like how they mentioned how historically people across the country, how it took 2 years to so it's not just like a wash over, it's done, we no longer have to do anything. It's like no, this is an active thing that we constantly have to think about and evaluate, especially when it came to resources and what they were giving people and how it felt very conditional to, well, we're letting you do this because you're helping us fight.
Right.
There's a lot of negativity to that. So I
Right.
also thought it was a really beautiful conversation.
Yeah. And I just love
Mm.
Joe and Lori.
I do too. And that's the thing about this book. Oh, I guess we can kind of talk about it, try not to dive into too much spoilers. That
Yeah.
I really appreciated about this is that the focus on them was just very, again, I'm wishing for more because I feel like there's just so much to it.
Yeah.
Um, but their relationship in the book is just so. I mean, how did you feel about it? Because I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it. I have so many questions. Like, I don't know how you perceived it, but I'm wondering, do you think that is Joe asexual? Is that the point?
I was considering that because I'm actually identify as asexual, so I
Okay.
read that and I was like, "Go off, sis."
Yeah.
But I am not too sure, and I think that's the cool thing about this is that for once we didn't feel like she needed to have a boy because I know a lot of the movies and then the book she had to have someone so that
Yeah.
way it would make sense in the world. And I kind of like that it was just open to discussion and it was based on their feelings. And I like how, well, I don't know if this is considered a spoiler. It might be considered a spoiler. We're 20 minutes in, so I'm just letting you guys know this may spoil you if you don't want to know about Joe and Lori. But I also recommend if you love Little Women, the classic story, you should definitely check out this one because the romance in it is very cute.
Yeah.
Um, but I like how Lori said, today, and this is like what's best for us. I like it, and this is what she likes. So I just appreciated that they were on the same page, whatever it was that they felt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I also loved that she was able to say, like, these are the feelings that I have, but this is not how it's going to manifest for me. But that did not take away the sense of urgency in the way that they felt about each other. Like, and this is like kind of a spoiler, but not really. There's a scene where she's like, when she shows up and she's like finding him, and she's like, no, I really need to talk to Lori. And he like knows automatically, like, oh no, if this is like, if it's like this, and she really needs to talk to me. Like, sometimes I think that romances, if there's not like a physical, like a heavy physical attraction, or there's not like super intense love story, they downplay the importance of the person in their life. And I love that this was so beautifully done. Like, it was a great platonic relationship, which fits the overall like new take of this remix, that it's a love story about family, not about necessarily a couple. And that to me is like what makes it so amazing.
Mhm. I completely agree. I really thought it was a powerful choice,
Yeah.
especially the ending overall. But before we get into too many spoilers about the ending, I also wanted to talk about the concept of um, in this book, it talks a lot about the conversations you have between Black people, between white people, and what is the duty of a Black person to like educate and inform. Because obviously, Joe and say Beth have very different methods of talking to people, which I really liked. That everyone can do. I think there's a specific quote that I wrote down that some people plant seeds, some people water seeds, and I
Yeah.
really like that view of some people have the fight in them to be like, this is what we need. And then some people are like, I'm just gonna be patient and like listen, but I don't have that fight to be like correcting people and things like that. So I wanted to ask you how you felt about it because it was very interesting from the different perspectives from each character, how they handled it.
Yeah, I feel like I love the way that the book approached it. I think it's another example of, once again, just showing that Black people are not a monolith, and not every Black person is going to approach conversations with white people in the same way. I feel like, everyone needs a Beth, right? Like, you need a Beth who's going to be gentle, but I also like that in her gentleness, like when they show Beth's inner monologue, she's like, I have to read this lady. Like, no, she's not in my mother's house saying all this stuff, but I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't like cause a reaction that's not going to get me the result I want. You need that. And I think you also need a Joe who's going to be like, I'm going to pop off and I don't care how you feel about it because you're wrong. And to me, that was really authentic. It's definitely real. I feel like depending on the day, I'm either a Beth or a Joe, depending on the
Mm-hmm.
situation. And yeah, I think it was really well done. And I think that I like the way that this did it better than the original, because Beth really had more like substance behind her approach. I felt like, I don't want, I'm going to keep calling the original girls like White Beth, White Amy, but White Beth, I feel like they make her so docile. And I know part of the book also deals with
She's
Beth
sick,
being
yeah.
sick, and they really like lean into her as like this sick, weak, like meager person. And here I felt like she had so much strength, and I loved that for Beth.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, and quickly for someone, Brittany just joined us. Hello. Hi. I'm sorry you missed my videos. I'm gonna start uploading very soon. I took a little holiday break and it lasted too long. Um, but I like how you said that, where you are a Joe some days and you're a Beth other days, which I also think is like a crucial conversation we don't have enough. Is that some days you're willing to like dish it out and be like, you're wrong, or not wrong, but it's like you don't understand this like perspective that I have, and your opinion, though valid to you, is not valid to me. Like you have to see my side too, or at least try and hear it out, and not just to push it aside already. But then other days it's like, no, I'm just gonna listen to what you say and be like, okay, but and like be really patient and validating and like just like I feel like it'd be really cool if we had more characters who on their mood picked when they fought or not, because I definitely think that's how I don't know
Yes.
Black people function in America, where it's like today I don't have the energy, and then some days you're like I'm ready to change the world. So yeah.
One thing that I did also appreciate in those moments when they introduced the character Ella is the code switching that happened, where you could kind of tell that Beth and Ella will be having a conversation, and that's a conversation between two Black women that sounds one way. And then and I'm blanking on her name right now, was it Constance?
Yes, the teacher, the ministry
Yeah, she's like
teacher.
like a missionary teacher.
Mm,
When she walks in, then you could tell that Beth, like, still true to her personality, but had to code switch a little bit and be like, oh, let me approach it this way, just because that is something that every Black person on earth can relate to doing, whether you have like close Black friends and close white friends, or just like acquaintances with white people. Like, you have entered spaces where you know you're gonna have to code switch.
yeah, completely. And then also code switching, but in this particular time period, the constant, like, being berated by, "You're not doing it right. You need our help. Like, this is the path you should take." Especially with Constance's character, who was constantly like, "Do this, do that. Like, why aren't you doing this? And, like, well, you should do it my way. I should teach you, and we should do this." So it's like having to take that, absorb all that, and be like super respectful and be like, "Okay, so I'm gonna take what you said and maybe not run with it, but like
Right.
let you know to your face, like, oh
It's like,
yeah,
let me gently explain to you why you're wrong.
yeah." Let me yeah. So I really liked that conversation. And again, just wishing like we could actually have books that really delved into how sticky it is. Cause it's very sticky. Like obviously, like how we said, some days you're Joe, days you're Beth. Like it's a very sticky situation. And I feel like even Joe in this book, she would have her rough days where it's like, today I don't have it in me. Like
Yeah,
I'd love to see characters, and I think Beth was a really good depiction where you said she felt strong. So I think they did that with Beth's character a lot in this book, where she felt that like some days she'd be like, I'm not gonna argue, but I'm gonna maybe suggest something. And then other days she'd be like, no, you're wrong. This is why. But
yeah,
she'd do it gently because she's
yeah.
Beth.
Even with her mom, like, even when her mom was like, "Oh, Amy can't do this," and Beth was like, "But what if she could?" Like, she's just very good at bringing that gentle strength, which I really loved about her character, especially because you don't really get that as much with the original, in my opinion.
Mhm, mhm. And then we are 30 minutes through, so just letting everyone who's watching that we may slip into spoilers. So if you haven't read this book, I really implore you to. I think Amber would agree. Do you agree that people
100%
should read
agree.
this? Okay, great. We implore you to check it out. I do have it linked below. Please definitely take a look at it or get it from your library if you can. It's very impactful, but I want to also talk about the ending because I think that's where this book really kind of shines for me, at least, in how they depicted a lot of the love in this book. Because Little Women, you think traditionally like it is a family, but it always ended with weddings and things like that. And I think this book does it in a very interesting way. So I wanted to ask you about the ending and lean on your expertise because I did not read Little Women properly in my high school days,
Yeah,
about the ending and how did you feel about it? How did you take it in?
I thought the ending was absolutely perfect, 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 perfect. I think that it gave us so much resolve. I think it leaves you with a lot of big feelings. And I also think it redeems characters who were not redeemed in the original. Spoiler for the original. In the original Little Women, Beth dies.
Yes, yes.
And she doesn't die. I thought that was amazing because I didn't think that we needed to see any of the sisters die, especially in this remix. So I love that. I love the redemption for Amy, where we see her grow up and become responsible. And I feel like in the original, Amy grows up and becomes like an insufferable adult a little bit. And in this one,
A wife? She becomes a wife?
yeah,
Like straight up?
literally. And in this one, she, she is still the youngest, and that is still a through line for her, that she's like young and learning not only about the world but about herself, but then like the little things she does to try to give back to her parents and help sustain her family, and understanding the responsibility that she still feels to her sisters and her parents. I thought that was amazing for her. I loved Amy's ending. I loved Beth's ending. I loved Joe's ending. I thought that that was perfect. I love that they didn't try to force anything that didn't need to be, but still managed to kind of like heal that sore spot that I think anyone who's read the original has with Joe and Lori. And
Mhm.
why am I blanking on a sister? I'm missing a sister.
Meg, who got
Meg.
married to
Meg.
Joseph or something.
No, she gets married to
Something with a J.
Wisdom. Joseph
Oh,
was the one
Wisdom.
that she
Oh,
was
not
supposed.
okay.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. The way that they did that, I thought was really clever. Like the way that Bethany Seymour did that, where she still has a sister be married to someone who another sister was originally interested in. At first, I was a little weirded out by that because I'm like, how old is Joseph? Because Amy is 18 at most,
Hmm.
and Meg at that point is 24. So I'm assuming that he was around like 24. I'll say 24 to 27 because you
Hmm.
know they did
But
age.
they said when they met in the north, wherever I think they were in Boston, that
Yeah,
he was actually similar in age to Lori. And I forget if Lori is also 20. I thought they were like around 21. So I think at
because
first that
okay,
they thought
okay,
he
yeah,
was
they did say
older.
that. Okay, yeah, yeah. So maybe
Hmm.
he's. I think it's fine. I still like them together. I think I was fine with that.
Hmm.
But Amy, I think that for Black women especially, there's so much like pressure to be like a strong, excellent Black woman, and I think it's amazing that they gave Meg that, but also gave her desires to like be a wife and mother. Like she, that was what she wanted from the beginning. She was like super concerned with it throughout the book. She was like, I don't know what this means. That like this is my only desire, and my sisters desire such like grand things, and I don't. And yeah, she got her happy ending too.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of managed to get their happy ending. I did have a question about Amy. If in the book, 'cause I know in the movies she ends up, and again, spoiler alert for everyone, um, that Amy ends up with Lori. Is that how it is in the book? Because that's so weird to me that a sister would do that to someone, even if their love wasn't like the traditional sense. And I always just hated that so much.
Everyone hates it. It's so
Okay, good, good. It's not me. Good,
the
good.
worst thing. It's been so long since I read the book too, so I don't remember what Joe's reaction is. And I feel like I've seen the movies more recently than I've read the book, so I can't remember where they go. Like I know in one of the movies they go to Paris. I don't remember if they go to Paris in the book, but yeah, I've always hated that. And I feel like it
Okay.
makes Amy so much more unlikable, and she's already so unlikable.
Hmm. Definitely. I Okay, good. I was just making sure because I really appreciated that this time I feel like it showed the sisters' conflicts a lot in this book
Yeah,
with love, with trying to chase their dream, with trying to act like each other or be better than each other because it kind of feels like that, which is I think very on par to being a sister. But I also really like that they didn't cross that line because I feel like that's a line that like realistically not a lot of people would cross unless you're like a really mean person. Like I really liked how it concluded in that sense where it was like I respect you, but also at the same time I know I'm like sensual and I'm chasing after my own dreams, and it just felt very realistic in the sense that we're all on our own path, and may cross a little bit in the sense of like wisdom and all those guys, like just a hair, but not literally like, oh, I'm gonna date the guy that you were with
really in
for
love with.
years.
Right.
And like, yeah, it's like,
Right.
oh, so I really appreciated that change. It was,
I
I think,
also
really good.
don't think you could have done that with Black sisters, especially Black sisters who had been through what these women had been through. Like, because one thing that you can tell is important to them is the fact that they need to be together, even if they're not in the same physical space. They've gone through so much to maintain togetherness. And like, it's brought up a lot how for enslaved people, like, your family could easily be taken from you at any minute. You never knew when you were going to be separated from your sisters or your daughters or your whatever, any part of your family. So for them to like go through so much and try so hard to stay together, for them to do something as flippant as like Amy marrying Lori, I just don't think it would have worked.
Definitely, definitely, and I think yeah, that was like a really big takeaway from the book. That even when the sisters were quarreling, it's like we still loved and kind of respected each other for like a lot of it. Where it's like our quarrel isn't because I don't like you; it's because I'm stubborn in the way that I think, and I know you're stubborn in the way you think, and we accept it. And but we're still together in a certain way. And then
I One thing I can't remember also if this was from the book or just was in the last movie, but do you remember when they're skating and Amy falls through the ice? When
mhm.
they had that scene in the book where they're like all skating and they're on the ice, I was like, oh my gosh, is someone gonna fall? Like I can't handle it.
I was concerned too, but I was very happy to see how they actually like did it because I feel like again, if the book was longer, then I think it could have done it and it could have done it a lot of justice. But since the size of the book and how they kind of condense all the moments, I think I was happy. I was waiting throughout the whole book. I was like, okay, when's Beth gonna die? When's gonna
Me
I was like, it's
too.
all gonna hit me. And I was like listening to the audiobook and I'm like, there's 8 minutes left. There's like no way that this could
I'm like, is she
happen.
gonna get like shot? Like, what's gonna happen? I'm like, what?
I felt
I
that too.
think
I was constantly like, oh, on the edge of my seat, like bad things are gonna happen.
I think they were trying to allude to her having sickle cell anemia.
Okay, is that I was at one point I was like, I don't know what she has. I don't think they've
Yeah.
given it a name.
I didn't get it with any of the symptoms, but towards the like middle or ending of the book, when that other family is living with them, and he's like, "This is an illness that they used to have on the continent." I was like, "Oh, it has to be sickle cell," because I feel like anytime there's like a disease or they're like, "This is a black disease," it's always sickle cell. I'm not
Oh,
super familiar with all the symptoms of that would be, but I know like the fatigue and stuff that she felt that would probably line up with that.
that makes sense. I think I've only read a few books with characters who actually have sickle cell in the sense that they yeah, the fatigue, the soreness, the bruising, because your
Yeah,
body doesn't know how to like heal itself
yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
So that makes sense. I ended the book and I was like, I don't know what Beth has, but at least she didn't die.
But I also liked how she used that as a chance to explain how so many times when Black women have something that's medically wrong with them, they're not taken seriously by doctors. Like the doctors effectively write that off, and they're like, "Oh, she's faking it or doing it for attention," when like she's obviously like had very real episodes. Like she faints at one point in the book. Like she's like sick in bed for days, and there are so many people. I mean, I relate to you tell a doctor something and they're like, "Oh, it's not that. You're fine," and then you find out
Mhm.
months later that you're dying.
Yeah, no, I agree. Medical issues are always such an interesting thing. And again, where this book kind of just brings up a lot of those really important conversations, but doesn't dive into it, where a lot of women are just told that, like, oh, we've never experienced it, and we being like the white, like European world hasn't experienced your specific thing, so you're obviously lying.
Right.
It's like, why?
Like, what about the rest of
Why?
the world?
Yes. It's like it's just so interesting that it's, like, so narrow your view where it's like, "This is the right way," and if I even suggest something else, it means that I'm saying your way's wrong, and now you're like, "Okay, you're lying to make me look stupid." It's like, you have started a whole argument. I didn't even mean to do I was just like,
Right.
"This is an issue. You don't have the answer. That's okay. Don't act like just because you don't know doesn't mean, like, I'm making things up." It's just very odd.
The
Mhm.
drama.
The drama, but again, that's why, like, I kinda wish this book, like, just kind of took more time and really I really kinda wish we saw that experience with Beth where she is, like, having to advocate for herself because that's what a lot of people have to do is really, really advocate for themselves for years being like, "I desperately need this, like, medicine or this treatment," and having to really advocate for themselves. In this book, and I think the reason why, because it's like YA, it's supposed to be more of an introduction and not being so harsh in
Yeah.
the sense, because that could maybe draw like audience readers away. But I really wish we kind of had those conversations and then also develop characters so that way it doesn't feel like a punch to the face or like we're only talking about race. Because Black people are way more than their skin and their racial struggles. They have romantic struggles or family struggles or just enjoyments, things they enjoy. So it's
Yeah.
like I feel like we could easily do these things if you made a really well-rounded like group of characters where they had their good and their bad. And I feel like we shouldn't be scared of having stories where they talk about those things in depth, both good and bad.
Exactly.
Hmm. Oh, and I wanted to ask you if you had any things that you wanted to talk about with from your notes too.
Yeah. One thing that I wish we would have gotten more of is their parents' relationship. Because there's so many small lines. Like that's one thing that I wrote down. I was like, ugh, wish we got more of like mom and dad because there's so many like small lines where like you can tell that their love story is so big and you can only imagine what they had to go through to be able to be together. Like they talk about briefly in the book, like how obviously slaves could not legally be married. So like they were allowed to marry because like their master thought it would be good for morale basically to like have a wedding on the plantation and like So you think about all that they've been through, and then they get separated by war essentially, and he comes back. And I feel like when he comes back, there isn't really like as much of a big deal about their reunion as I would have liked. Like, I don't know how you felt about that. He just like is back, and then he's just like there.
I completely agree that he kind of just became like a furniture piece in a sense where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
dad's here.
Which is like they spend so much time hyping him up, like he is literally like the hero in their eyes. And then when he's finally on the page, it's just kind of like, Dad's home. It's cool.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that is an issue with like the size and the amount of time that wasn't allotted to him because of like the page count. But
Yeah.
I would have loved to see those two because obviously they raised the girls together. There's also a lot of they sprinkled in that Amy was adopted or like kind of
Yeah.
just brought into the family. So I
Yeah.
feel like their beginning family dynamic was really, really missing. And the letters hyped it up that they were so connected, so like, the love was just so deeply rooted in each person. But then we just kind of coasted over it. Like, okay,
Right.
there's a lot of love, and we love him, even though he's not talking very much. It's like, okay.
Okay, it's back. I
Oh
don't
no,
know
did
what
I
just
freeze?
happened. Yeah, I don't know what just happened.
Oh no. Did you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. It was like a second. But yeah, I completely agree. It was like, why hype it up so much? And then it kind of fizzled out. And then the other thing in my notes was how many times it's like referenced that like proper society is referenced in these ways. And
Mhm.
I'm like, it's a I don't know. It was kind of just it was interesting to me. Like there's just a moment where Lori and Joe are like Joe is writing and she's staying at that like boarding house, and then like the woman comes in and like, okay, it's improper for this man to be here now because it's like 6 o'clock or something, and like all these little things. And I was like, it's so interesting how quickly, because they're in these very black spaces, like how quickly we adopted all of these rules from white society and then made them our we like just adopted them so easily, knowing that like obviously years ago we were all staying in the same quarters together. Like there weren't all these overly formal society rules and no one considered themselves improper. But now that you have the freedom to live how you want, what we deem proper is to live that way. I don't know. I just thought that was so interesting because it comes up so many times in the book.
Yes. And that even in the free colony, or not colony, the free, I forget what they called it specifically, but in their village where they were allowed to
Yeah.
live freely and have homes, that they still were wearing like proper clothes that were really heavy and
Yeah, like
thick,
the
even
hoop
during the hot
skirts
summer.
and yeah.
Yeah,
And like it's obviously like
because
hot in North Carolina and they're still wearing like
mhm.
all this formal attire just to go to work. Yeah.
Mhm. And it was because of, like, the judgment of the people who were coming in, who were white, being like, "We need to act a certain way or else they will stop giving us resources," or come in harder and be like, "Well, we need to help them be right on the right path of life." So it was very interesting. It was brought up so often about, like, how the way they dressed and the way they felt around other characters, even when they went north, when, Amy and Joe went north, and
Yes.
they were around those women who were constantly talking about timeliness and things like that, which is an interesting
Yeah.
conversation about, like, people, what is it called? It's like, people of color time? I forget. It's like
CP
something.
time. CP time.
Yes, thank you. Where how that is kind of there's, that theory that a lot of people, in a way of kind of fighting the oppressive system, I come when I want to come. Like I'll
Yeah.
be a little late, whatever. And I kind of like seeing that in the sense where it's like Joe and Lori were fighting the system in their own little way, where it's like
Yeah.
it's not a big deal to like wear clothes that are like not like traditional or considered country. Like I'm still a good person. Like
Yeah. And
so
there's
it's
even
very
that
interesting.
moment where the older man who owns like the boarding house that Joe is staying in like has that conversation with Lori, like, are y'all gonna get married? Like, why do you keep hanging out with this girl? Are you gonna like marry her and do this right? And he's like, I think we're fine.
Yeah, I'm happy. Isn't that like what freedom is supposed to be? Is like
Right.
happiness.
Right. He's like, we're
Mhm.
not doing anything that's like wrong. So why is it a big deal that we're just happy?
Yeah, it was that was very interesting. I didn't even consider that about how when the transition into freedom really didn't become, our own system. It became let's just copy them and hope that they don't. want to, enslave us again. Because I think that was also a lot of fear that they had,
Oh, for
where it's like,
sure.
if we don't do this right, we're not going to assimilate, and there's an actual like physical danger to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, and I'm sorry, I've been ignoring the chat. My bad. Um, let's see. Does it say? Can you guys put on the topic of books of discussion? Me and my sister will stay up to date. Do you have? We can make recommendations at the end of the live show if you want for some books, because I know I definitely have some books that I would recommend if you enjoyed this book or want something similar to it.
Oh, same. Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's see. I'm rereading The Hate You Give. Nice.
I haven't read
I
it
also.
in a long time.
You haven't read it?
No, I've read it, but like,
Oh.
probably when it first came out. I haven't reread it. I
Same.
haven't.
I haven't reread it, yeah, since it came out too. But I recently read Concrete Rose by Andy Thomas, and boy, I think I actually liked it more so than The Hate You Give.
So I purposely didn't read that one because I know it's like the main character is like a rapper, right?
Oh, that's on the come up.
Oh, on the comic. Oh, this is the third. Okay, yeah, yeah. This is the one that's like the prequel to The Hate You Give, right? Okay,
All about the dad. Yeah.
okay. That one.
Yeah, it's actually really sweet because I thought it was going to be all about his, because he goes to jail and stuff,
Yeah.
which is not a spoiler. In The Hate You Give, it talks all about that.
Hmm.
I thought that's what it was going to end up being about, but it wasn't. It was about him becoming an adult and being responsible. So I feel like it was kind of fun and all about the love and the like complications that he had to deal with without making him too much of the victim in a
Yeah.
sense. So I highly recommend that. I honestly think that one I enjoyed it a lot more than The Hate You Give, because The Hate You Give skirts around a lot with how to be black around white people, whereas I think Concrete Rose is about how do I be a person, a dad, a partner, a good boyfriend, a good son. I just really enjoyed it.
I love that. Okay, I'm gonna check that one out then.
Violent, yes. Yeah. Is there any other things that you wanted to talk about? I have a bunch of notes, but I feel like we talked about a
I
lot of the
think we
things that's
covered a lot.
briefly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Overall, I just really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see the other books that come in the series. And this should, I know someone in the chat said earlier, like they should make this into a movie or something. They should definitely option this. Would be such a good like limited series on Netflix. Like
It
100%,
would.
it would do so well. Like look how good Bridgerton has done. Like obviously we want to see more black people and non-white people in period pieces. And I mean, I
Because we were
love,
in all of history.
right. We've been here the whole time. We didn't just show up in like 1984. We've been here since the beginning. So yeah, and yeah, I'm excited for the potential for there to be more stories where they talk about the people they forgot to bring up the first time.
Yes. I love that. And I also think there's a lot of people who have that discussion, especially around Bridgerton, being like, well, do we want to just insert people into these stories that weren't created for them? But I also, for the people who think that way, would also start to talk about, well, you by not putting them in, you're technically not acknowledging a whole lot of history. So if you like these traditional stories, why not have a kind of either realistic tinge to them or have a remix of it where it's like you allow more people to be a part of this story, because we can't just pretend that like history is only white, because it's just not
Yeah,
how it was. It's not how it is.
completely. And I also like think we should stop pretending that every period piece ever made is so historically accurate. There are so many pieces where it's like, oh, women wouldn't have been able to do that. You wouldn't have been able to do that because this actor is of a certain nationality. Like, let's stop pretending. Like, these are perfectly like innocent and accurate retellings, and just do it. Like, if we can have shows where people are flying dragons and using magic and doing all kinds of things, we can have like a black store owner in a store set in the 1600s. It's fine. We'll be okay.
Yes, and black protagonists in historical pieces,
Yes.
because they did exist and they have stories that are important to tell.
And because history is so messy, there are more black protagonists than people want to actually give credit for, because then they have to acknowledge the reasons why there were black people in certain spaces to begin with.
Yes, and I think that's the big thing, and I think this book does a really great job, like, just talking about how we cater history to white people. It's something we've always been combating, where it's like, you're uncomfortable, but this is history, this is just a fact, and that it's not to make you feel less than or make you feel bad, especially in our contemporary time. I think a lot of people will be like, "Well, get over it because I'm uncomfortable talking about this. I didn't enslave you. I'm contemporary. I'm progressive. I'm this."
Right.
It's like, yes, but the lack of acknowledgement is just like, that's just so important nowadays. It's like, just we have to acknowledge that, hey, this happened.
Yeah.
There are ramifications that we're still facing today because of this thing, and ignoring it doesn't solve anything except just like angering people and also ignoring the very, very real issues people face. So I kind of like how this book brought up all of that.
Yeah, it did a really good job of bringing to the surface that you should always consider the source, like who actually wrote this history, and what do they have to lose or gain by dramatizing or dumbing down the facts. Like, who does this actually serve? Like, I know before Jo really starts writing in the book, there's that moment where she reads someone, like a reporter came and did like a story on their like freed people village and didn't actually talk to anyone in the village. And like, you have to think about things like that. And I hope that that is also a reminder for readers as they're reading, like, everything you see, especially in the age of the internet and the screenshot and not actually clicking the link and just reading the headline, that you need to consider who is the source of this information and what do they have to lose or gain from getting it out there.
Oh, completely. And I love how you brought it back to social media in a sense, because this is something we definitely face today, where a lot of people will read the headlines and have very strong opinions about things. And it's like, hey, what is like, I think it's okay to have your own biases and things like that, and your own sensitivities, because it is an uncomfortable conversation to have. I mean, I think that's the thing. Black people don't want to be screaming to the rooftops that Black Lives Matter. We just want it to matter. Like, we don't,
Right.
it's, I don't think anyone actively wants to have these conversations and arguments, but it's something that we have to do to get past it. And I think that's the thing we keep skipping over, and just like, oh, I'm not going to talk to you about your viewpoint. I'm either going to think you're wrong or right and just scoot along. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's not how you
That's
handle
not how life
any issue.
works. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What else did you say? So what was the first book you ever brought and still have? Oh, ever, I don't
Yeah.
even remember the first book
Still
I
have.
bought. Let's see. And then someone says that they started with Goosebumps, which is very cute. I can totally, yep.
I don't still have them. I wish I did, but I was a huge Junie B. Jones girl. Like, Junie B. Jones was my everything. The Junie B. Jones books and then the Amber Brown books as well. I used to have all of them, like every single one. Those were the first books I could remember wanting, like asking my parents to take me to the bookstore because a new one was coming out. And this is how, like, I feel like a million years old. The only way you would know that a new book was coming out was if you got like the Scholastic catalog, or like all the publishers had catalogs and they'd be like coming to the shelves. And now it's like you can blink and
Google
those,
it.
and like, or go on TikTok for 10 seconds and know all the books coming out. But those are the first books
Yeah.
that I remember being obsessed with. But I also have like a really vivid memory of going to a book fair and getting like a really nice copy of Anne of Green Gables and like reading that and not liking the book.
I love that. That's such a book reader problem, where you get this like really nice edition of a book and you're so excited to read it and you crack it open and it's like, oh, the inside's not as good as the outside.
Completely, completely.
Mhm. I don't remember exactly. I know I read like a lot of Dr. Seuss as a kid, and that was like what got me into reading as a child. I definitely was not an avid reader by any means. I think the first like maybe like chapter books that I would kind of read were the Treehouse books. You know,
Oh
those
yeah,
adventures.
love
Yeah, I
those.
think my mom would always be like, "Try this out," and I'd be like, "I guess." And I really enjoyed like the spider. I'm looking at the little section of my childhood books, like
Yeah,
the Spiderwick Chronicles. I read. I think that was one that I went to the library and was like, "I need to get the next one."
yeah.
And I don't know if you ever read Judy Moody, but that was also one that I think I enjoyed.
Really
As an
nice.
adult now, I'm judging myself for that, but I think as a kid, I really loved her attitude.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And then I remember like the first time I got into fantasy for the first time was when I read Aragon. Do you remember that book? The Dragon.
I remember.
And I feel like I just wanted to read it because it was a really big book. And I was like, I'm going to read this huge book. Like, I'm going to go to
Yeah.
the library and bring home this like 5-pound book. It's going to be amazing. But I do remember really liking that series too.
Oh, that's so cute. I always did that too when I was like starting to get older. I was like, I'm gonna read this giant book.
Yep.
And then I also haven't heard of Amber Brown either, because I know,
Amber
yeah,
Brown
Brittany
was
mentioned that.
that girl. My favorite one was Amber Brown is not a crayon.
It's not a crayon? Oh my
Yeah,
god, I wanna see, like, the book cover of that now.
you
I'm
have
gonna definitely Google that after.
she would just be always going through, like, she always had something to prove, and she made her point.
That's so funny because I feel like that's very much the kind of aesthetic of Judy Moody, which are the books that I read where she was like there was books where she'd be like, "I'm gonna be a Hollywood star," and then the next day she's like, "I'm gonna be a
I love it.
doctor," and it's like her not knowing how to do any of this stuff, but, like, having the willpower and telling her little brother, being like, "I'm doing this. I don't care about you." So it's
I
just
love that.
funny.
I feel like middle grade has come so far too. Like I love middle grade books, and I wish that some of these had been out when I was like a middle grade reader.
Yeah. No, I agree too. I feel like, yeah, you look back even, like, 15 years ago when, like I feel like it was 15 years ago when, like, what's it called? Click and,
Click. I feel like no
Vampire
one
Diaries.
remembers Click, and I'm like, how do you guys not remember Click? Those
I
books
distinctly remember
defined
it.
my life. Like the Click books, the Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging books, like those are a big deal to me. Um, yeah, like what was the other one? There was this book I remember when I was in like third or fourth grade that everyone was reading, and it was called Flipped, and it was
Mm.
a dual perspective romance. So like it would be like one chapter would be like the girl, and then you literally would turn the book upside down, and the next chapters would be the other characters. And I was like, this is mind blowing literature. This is the best storytelling I've ever seen in my life. It's so creative. But now I'm
I
like,
love that.
it's terrible. Oh, and I also love the series of Unfortunate Events. I did read all those, and I love them. And the Chronicles of Narnia. I read most of them, and I really
Mm, yeah. Oh, that's so great. And let's see, Erin said her oldest one was The Royal Diaries, first came out in 1999.
don't know that.
Is that the same series? Because I also know that the Princess Diaries and stuff that they
Oh
like,
yeah,
if that's in the same kind of
they might be
series?
because that's like definitely a UK author.
I
Yeah,
think so, but I don't know. But The Royal Diaries, I personally haven't read that, and I didn't read The Princess Diaries or all of those stories
I didn't
either.
read them either.
But yeah, I feel like that used to be very much YA and middle grade stories where you would just have these really long, never-ending stories about just
Oh,
a
for
really hard-headed protagonist, and I'm like, I'm glad
sure. Isn't
we've grown up a
like
little.
series is probably like 12 books. Like they used to be so long.
Mhm. Yep. Let's see. I have A Little Life, but have not read it yet, but I did think what did you think of it? Have you read A Little Life by any chance?
I haven't. I have it, but I haven't been prepared to be that sad in a while.
I have it too, and I read the first 50 pages, and I think it's well written, but I think it's definitely a book that you have to sit down and read only that, and
Yes.
I'm a sporadic reader. I like to read a
Oh,
lot of books at one time because you'll, like, forget the details. They like, every page just so many details, and I feel like not all of them are necessary, but if you want, like, the full enjoyment, you just have to really dedicate that time to just absorbing it. One day
mhm.
I will do it, and I don't know,
I was
cry my eyes
reading
out maybe?
one day. I've also seen that that author has another book coming out. Either it just came out at the end of last year or just is about to release. So I know people are really excited about that.
Mhm. Yes, I saw that too. No idea what it's about, but,
No idea.
like yeah, I was like, I should probably read, and I'm that person who gets excited about an author's book coming out, but then realize, like, "Oh, I should read the first one first." Like, don't get
Yeah.
too excited yet. Let's see. Okay, so when we got back to next, I got kicked off again, so my sometimes I go on YouTube. Let's see. Different series, Royal Diaries, collection of authors' classic wrote diaries. Famous royals.
That sounds fun.
It does sound fun. It sounds better than what I was thinking about Princess Diaries. But I love how people relied so heavily on Scholastic for those kind of notifications of here's a book series you'd like.
I know Scholastic Book Fair Day was really like the highlight of my school year for sure.
Nice. I feel like I went to one book fair in elementary school. I probably had gone to more, but I only specifically remember this one because it was the first time I saw mangas, which I think was really the actual reason that got me into going to the library and, like, checking out books. I had a manga at that, like, Scholastic fair, and it was about a girl and her pet ferret. It was, like, such a cute little kid story, and I
Yeah.
loved it so much that I was like, "I need more," and I started collecting mangas, which is a lot of my, like, childhood books are mangas. But, like, for some reason, like, I love how other people, like, really actually actively started to like find and read books, and I'm over here like geeking out, being like, I want romance mangas.
I love
I
that.
literally started bringing mangas to school in like 5th grade about like I need
I love
my
it.
next manga.
No, I would love a manga recommendation. I feel like the only one that I've had on my list for like years that I have never gone to get and read is Orange. That
Mm.
one was really popular. Everyone's like, you have to read Orange. And I was like, but is that also a series? Is that why I didn't read it?
It's a series, but technically it's a short series for mangas because they have like these nice new collections where it's just like 2 volumes. I think it's like 6 volumes traditionally if you think of like manga-sized books. I liked Orange, but I feel like it's a good story, but it talks about, I don't know if you know the concept of Orange, but it's about a group of friends where their friend dies in a
Oh,
particular way and develops the power to go back in time and tries to fix it. And I feel like a big part of the story is there's a lot of burden on the main characters to save their friend. And I'm like,
okay.
that doesn't seem fair to put all that on young kids. So I personally don't like love Orange the way some people do, but I can see there's such an emotional drive to being like, I'm responsible. I need to save this person's life. I see value in them. So I
Hmm.
would recommend that one. I just like I don't think it's a top tier for me, especially because just like how they don't ever talk about that aspect. But a lot of mangas, in my opinion, are problematic, and you kind of just go into them being like, I expect it.
That's fine. Is there a
Yeah.
romance manga that you recommend?
Recently, one of my favorites from last year was this one called A Sign of Affection, which is all about
Ooh,
a girl who's in college and she's deaf and she's trying to have a relationship with this guy. And it's like the sweetest, purest, like most unproblematic manga I've ever read. And I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Uh,
looking
so
at it
that's
right
just like
now.
a pure romance. My other recommendation, if you want something more action-packed and adventurous, but still has like love and politics, I also highly recommend Yona of the Dawn, which is like a 30-volume series. They are still crunching
Right now.
out books, but I am in it. Like I feel like after you get past like the first, and again, you have to kind of get past the first like 4 volumes to get into the actual story. But the
Hmm.
character development over those volumes are so beautiful. It starts off with this girl who's really soft. She's a princess, but then her dad gets assassinated, and she's thrown into like a war basically where everyone's trying to kill her and take her country. And she kind of has to build backbone and be like, no, bitches, this is my country.
I love it.
It's
Wait, what was
great.
the second one called? What was the title?
Yona of the Dawn, and the first one was A Sign of Affection.
Got it. Adding to my list right now.
I love mangas very, very dearly, and when I'm in a reading slump, I just go to a manga. I'm just like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And you just it flies and the next thing you know, you've read, like, 12 books in a day, and you're just like, "I feel so good about
It's like, am
myself."
I better than everyone?
Oh my god, how did you know this? Oh my god.
Yeah, I got into graphic novels more last year, but I feel like I'd be really like I feel like I would really enjoy manga too.
I highly recommend it. I feel like it's very under-recognized. I don't know if that makes sense. Words are hard. It's not recognized well enough in the States, I feel like, because a lot of people will think Naruto or think
Yeah,
Bleach or those kind of stories that also really populate our knowledge of anime. That it's all these like guys and fantasy stories and being really tough.
yeah.
So I'm very much I've always grown up on the opposite end where I was like Sailor Moon was my childhood. So I was just like, and now I love all the romance mangas, and I'm
Yeah,
trying to get like I'm so excited they're starting to do a lot of reboots for them. But I definitely think yeah we man, mangas are so good, dude.
I'm sold. I'm sold.
I'm so, yes, that's what I wanted. Oh, and then Brittany had this question about what was the first author you read, and it was for me 100% Dr. Seuss, most
For
likely.
sure. It
Like,
had to be. It had to be. Yeah.
yep. I feel like it's very.
Oh no, I can't hear you.
Sorry, my headphones died.
That's fine. Happens to me all the time. I think there was a dozen or so. Ooh, I want to look these up because I feel like that would be really cool.
Yeah, Royal Diaries. That does sound cool. I feel like there's a lot of series that I saw that were about royalty, and in my head, I lumped them all together, and I probably shouldn't. I should probably take some time and pick them apart.
I know, I know. There's so I mean, we only talk about the one royal family so much, and I think anytime you say the word royal, you just like picture those people.
Yeah. And I know we've gone over the hour mark, so if anyone had any other questions, oh wait, there's another one. Okay, how do you feel about Magic Treehouse books growing up? I have not reread them, so
I
I
haven't
still only
read.
think of them fondly.
Yeah, same. I
Yeah.
feel like I could see how they could easily have problematic elements in them, but from what I remember, Magic Tree House was a great time.
Yeah, I do kind of want to reread them. What I was gonna do recently was actually buy them in Spanish to try and like elevate my Spanish reading skill. But then I realized, oh, I haven't read a Treehouse book since I was like 10, so I don't even remember how this. Because like they think the format of the story is like kids are playing and they time travel, they get in trouble, and then they get out. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's a pretty similar like structure for all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty
Hmm.
much the gist of all of them, but I haven't read them in so long, and yeah, I don't know if I want to reread them just in case.
Yes, same. I'm like maybe I should just save that for
I
my childhood
hate when
because I
I
think there's.
reread a book and I'm like,
Let's see.
"Ooh, that's problematic."
Yeah. Did you read them and like as an adult now and you're like, oh gosh, maybe I should just leave that in my childhood?
Not those books, but I recently had a moment where I used to really enjoy the Nutcracker,
Mm.
and then I like watched it over the holidays, and I was like, "Oh, this is very problematic."
As enjoyable as I
A
once
little
thought.
racist, but I guess the
That's the
music
thing
is
about
too.
classics too. Yeah, that
Yeah,
always happens.
yeah. I think anything that was widely popular, like, we accepted a lot of things. Like a lot of things, we just were like, fine, that is fine. And yeah, I'm glad that those things are being, called out for things that have issues in them. But it is definitely hard when you have to like cancel your faves.
Yeah, and but that's the thing. I feel like our modern solution to bigotry and ignorance is cancel culture. And I know that there's a lot of problems with cancel culture. And like to the extreme sense that so many people are so fearful when it's like, okay, but repercussions, what are they? Like this is my individual view on something, you don't have to agree with me. Or if it's about something really like about systemic racism, it's like, okay, why can't you agree with me? There's so many things. Cancel culture is very interesting in the sense that what is our solution or consequence
Yeah.
to bigotry? What are we going to do as a community to like counteract some people's opinions where it's like, okay, but your mindset is literally endangering people. So it's very interesting.
It's interesting to me too, and I think it's honestly hilarious to me that like there are so many people who are fearful of being canceled when you look at people who have been canceled and I'm like, I think they're thriving. So like I don't know what you're afraid of. Like
Yeah,
most
just
people
people
who
who.
are canceled, they're still like very wealthy, very successful, like get tons of opportunities to add to their wealth. So it's actually profitable to be canceled.
Yes, that's what I've always seen too. But then it's so interesting talking to a lot of my friends. I went to a private college. I had the privilege of going, even though I have to pay all those student loans, and it was probably way too expensive for my broke ass. But it's very interesting talking to people's perspectives about how genuinely fearful they are. So it's an interesting subject because I do kind of like that at least we are trying to combat bigotry, but I don't know if it's actually because there's no consequence. There's no one's changing their minds. There's no conversation. And I guess that's why I think this book would have been really cool to actually see those difficult conversations because all those conversations they had about like race and when they disagreed, it kind of just stopped with them either disagreeing or like the main character would make a great point and then we would just stop. It's like, okay, but is that person learning? Is like constant
Yeah.
learning? Are these different people actually learning anything? It's like, can we
Yeah.
have space to have these conversations safely so that way we can actually kind of get on the same page finally?
I really felt that way towards the end when Joe and the black woman who was going to publish her book have that conversation where she wants her to dumb down the book and Joe fights back. I'm like, I wish we could have seen the resolve of that. Like, does it just end where she walks out and that woman never sees the problematic error of her ways? Or like, does Joe still get published? We never really find that out. I don't know that they don't mention that she gets published. She's just like going, well, no, she's going to Raleigh and that's where she's gonna like enroll in school or whatever. But yeah, I wish that there were so many moments where it's like, ooh, big moment, but we don't get like a nice resolve. And again, like this book could have done easily with another like 100 to 200 pages.
100%, 100%. I completely agree. Oh, and then so they did read the
Oh,
Treehouse books. And like, damn, let me leave it there.
Dang.
Aw. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a shame. Okay, I can't wait to pass along my books to my children whenever I have some. That's so cute. I love the idea of passing on books to, like, family members. I, like, think that's definitely something I wanna do in my future.
For sure. I have a goddaughter, and my favorite thing is just to like buy her books. And she's literally 10 months old, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but you
What is reading? What are you doing? But since if there's no more questions in the chat, I think a good way to kind of wrap this up would be to give a recommendation of a book
yeah.
kind of similar, either similar to this or something that you really enjoyed. I'd love to hear what you would recommend, Amber.
Yeah, if you are interested in more Black people set in period pieces, especially around this era, like the Civil War Reconstruction era, I highly recommend Beverly Jenkins' Women Who Rebel series. They're historical romance novels set right after the Civil War. I've only read the first in the series, but I think there are 3 total. They came out, they're actually very backlist. They came out, I think, in the late 90s.
Oh
And they're
wow.
just so fun. They definitely have like a little bit of steam, but not like too steamy. The characters are really well done. The characters are very complex, and it's like, yes, it's a romance, but it's also about so much more. You get a lot of the themes that were in this book, where there's like found family and finding yourself, what freedom actually means. In the first book, we follow a woman who is a teacher, so she's teaching people who were formerly enslaved now how to like read, and you get such a good understanding of what society was like for people at that time, and how even in the midst of having to do all of these hard things, like start villages and colonies and like learn how to be a citizen after you weren't even seen as a person, you're still doing things that everyone else thinks about, like falling in love and like learning who you are. So that one, I absolutely cannot recommend that enough. It was so good.
Oh, that's definitely on my radar because I know Beverly Jenkins is a very prolific writer who has like huge backlist of just like a lot of works that a lot of people love. And I feel terrible. I haven't read any of her work, but I definitely want to prioritize that in the future. I don't know about this year because I have my own like books but when I tackle my TBR, then I definitely want to check out her writing because
So
I
good.
definitely hear a lot about her.
Yeah, she's so good.
Mm-hmm. And then my recommendation, if you like retellings, another retelling, but it's contemporary, is what's it called? Oh, it's called Pride by Ibby Zaboy. Have you heard of Pride?
Oh yeah, yeah. I kept meaning to pick that up because it's set in New
Mm.
York, isn't it?
It's set in New York, and it talks a lot about. So it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, or I think
Mhm.
it's actually considered a remix as well. Yeah, Pride and
Okay.
Prejudice remix. So it's not a period piece. It's in New York, modern time, and it's the same kind of romance story. But I love how it actually talks about like sisterhood, gentrification, a lot of like serious topics, and a lot of race like indoctrinated into it because they now have a full black cast. So
Oh,
it's a very I think it's a very good book. It's also fun. So it's kind of like this book, very similar, where it's like it introduces a lot of serious topics, but they don't go really deep into it. They just introduce it and kind of talk about it and make a stance about it. I would highly recommend it. Is Ibby Zaboy is another author that I really, really enjoy. And I
uh-huh.
definitely need to check out more of Bethany C. Maurer's work. I think
Oh,
I
for
have,
sure.
yeah, I have a
Am I
song
thinking
water.
right? Didn't she write a book that what? Does she have like a Black Mermaid book too, or am I thinking of someone else?
She does. She does. A song below water. I have it on my
Yes. Yeah.
TBR.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like definitely on my list, and I think the second book in that series came out too. I don't know if it's a companion novel or if it's a sequel, but there's two like mermaidy books.
There are 2 mermaid books, and I've been doing the thing recently where I'll buy a book and realize I bought the second book in a series, and I'm pretty sure I have the second book and not the first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely her writing in this book. Again, if you're in this chat and you haven't read this book, So Many Beginnings, Little Women Remix, I highly, highly, highly recommend. I think it's a very good book, and I think we need to flood Bethany C. Maurer with some like not complaints, but like, can we get an epilogue?
Just
Can we
anything
get
else,
a
like deleted. What was on the editing room floor? Like, give me the pages that you couldn't put it in the book. I will read them.
Yes, I would love an unedited version of this where it's like literally 500 pages. I would eat it up.
100% easily. And I'm
Mhm.
definitely gonna look and grab those manga that you recommended too and check them out.
Oh, thank you. I definitely and then Beverly Jenkins is in my heart and in my soul. I will start with the Women Rebels series because
Yes.
it's Women Rebels. What would
Women Who Rebel. Yeah.
Women Who Rebel. I will definitely start with that because I also really enjoyed this aspect of just
Yeah.
history telling, because I think people are often, again, with that conversation of that's history, been there, done that. It's like, no, but we don't talk about it. We don't
Right.
recognize it. So I kind of like that these books are doing that.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Agreed.
Okay. Since there's no more questions in the chat, I think it's time to like wrap up this live show. I thank you so much, Amber, for joining, and everyone in the chat for joining. Do you have anything? Her channel's linked below, but do you have anything you're doing that you want to announce or anything?
I don't. Just happy New Year, everyone. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun, and I loved reading this book. And this is definitely the kind of book where after you read it, you want to talk about it with someone. So I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Yay! I'm so glad that you enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely feel the same. Where it's like I need to discuss this with people, and I kind of want to read Little Women now, and like read it and then reread this one to kind of get a better understanding of like the
Mhm.
whole Beth situation and getting to feel the characters. Because I am just the movie stan. I love the movies very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely piqued my interest, but I can't thank you enough for joining. It
Yeah.
means so much that you enjoyed the book. Everyone, make sure you check the link down below. Check out Amber's channel. And yeah, Happy New Year's, everyone. And thanks for joining. I will see you
Yeah.
next month with our next read. Definitely follow us on Twitter to hear about the next book. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.